Good morning, lovely ladies and gentlemen. Steve Collins coming to you from beautiful, cloudy San Antonio, Texas, the second most powerful, passionate, and purposeful coach and speaker in the world. I hope you guys are having a wonderful day today. So far, I want to have a conversation with you that stems from a philosophy and an idea in the Voice of One coaching program, which is this: crisis creates a system. When you find yourself in a crisis situation, and a crisis is defined uniquely by each individual. What is a crisis for me and my real estate or coaching team is not a crisis for another person, is not a crisis for another team, is not a crisis for somebody else. What you define as crisis is largely connected to your standards for your business practices or the boundaries you have set for yourself in your personal relationships. What exactly do I mean by that? Is that you can have a crisis in your business. You can have a crisis in your marriage. You can have a crisis with your children. You can have a crisis in any area of your life that brings an outcome where you recognize a consistent pattern. So you must perceive the persistent pain-producing patterns of your life, and then you must plan to follow a process and procedure to stop that cycle if you want the cycle to stop. Otherwise, you're like Albert Einstein's victim. He said the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. The thinking that has you in this current pattern, creating a negative outcome for you, well, if your thinking does not change, you're going to perpetuate the pattern. So you must perceive the persistent pain-producing experience or pattern. You must perceive this pain-producing experience or pattern, and you must be prepared to create a plan that has a process and a procedure that you can follow to stop the cycle. What might that look like? I'm glad you asked. It is being able to, in peacetime, when you're not in the midst of that circumstance, create a plan, process, and procedure for when that battle shows up at your front door. When that battle shows up at your front door, you must at some point either fall subject and prey to that persistent activity and behavior, or you have the option of creating during peacetime a plan, a process, and a procedure for how you are going to handle when that comes up again. And it really is that simple. You just need to take the time to sit back, observe, and look for, first and foremost, what I would call triggers. If you see a trigger, something that occurs that activates a situation, let's just say in a marriage relationship, let's say that there is something one or the two spouses will say or do that activates a response from you that causes you to feel a certain way, that then opens up, let's say, a negative conversation, or as you would call it in REAL life, an argument or a fight or something that creates a division. If you notice there's an ongoing pattern in that area, then you can create a plan with a process and procedure that you will follow to avoid and to stop that cycle. So what might that sound like? You might realize, okay, at some point there is a trigger whenever someone that I'm close to offers me, as an example, unsolicited advice. You ought to do this. You should do that. You need to do this. You got to do that. If that's a trigger, then I can say, okay, when I hear these statements, now look, you write this stuff down, y'all. Do you want to avoid and stop the cycle of the painful stuff? Well, then you've got to do the work. And here's the work. It's not as complicated as people think. Write it down. What are the triggers? What are specific trigger statements that get me riled up? Here are some specific trigger statements that get me riled up. Number one. Then you write underneath that, okay, what will I choose to have as a response in that situation when I'm aware of the trigger? I will shut my mouth. I will be quiet. I will count backwards from 10. Take a deep breath. Next, what will I do? I will make a decision in that moment to seek to understand rather than to be understood. I will not defend myself. I will simply listen. And then I will say, thank you. Now you have a plan, a process, and procedure that you can follow. Now, I know it's not sexy. I know it's not gorgeous. I know it doesn't have rainbows and glitter and unicorns. It's friggin' work. Yet, if you have a perpetuating, painful process or pattern that you need to break out of, you need to be perceptive enough to understand that you must create a plan and have a process and have a procedure that you can follow if you want to stop that cycle. Now, I don't know anybody who wants to continue to perpetuate cycles that bring them a negative experience or create an ongoing regular issue. So my gift to you today is, if you want to avoid the ongoing painful process and pattern, you must put together a plan, follow a process and a procedure. You've got to be able to write it out. Here's the trigger. Here's how I intend to respond. I will create this response, and therefore I will get a new outcome. You know, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. If you want something you never had, you got to do something you've never done. And this, my friends, is one way that you can, first of all, perceive the painful process that continues to perpetuate, and you can create a plan to follow a process and a procedure to stop the cycle. I've taught you how to do it. Here's my question. Are you going to do it? I hope you choose to. Have a great day, guys.